Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Sneha and today I'm doing yet another foundation review in my Best Foundation for Oily Skin series. The foundation for today is the Marc Jacobs Remarkable Full Cover Concentrate Foundation. So if you'd like to see a demo, a review and a wear test for this foundation, please continue watching. Now I was matched in the store to the shade number 58, which is Honey Deep. It's a shade meant for deep skin tone with peach undertone, and the sales representative did recommend using a hydrating primer with it. So the one they sell is the coconut primer that I'm going to insert a picture right here that retails for about 40 pounds, I believe. So I didn't want to get that, so I asked her for a sample and she was kind enough to give me one. So I'm going to do one half of my face with this primer underneath just to see if that helps the foundation. Another thing she said is that she saw a lot of people online using Beauty Blender with this foundation and that she wouldn't recommend it. She did ask me to use a buffing brush for getting the best finish with this foundation. I'm just going to use my Sephora airbrush brush. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the demonstration and then I'm going to talk more about the foundation. So as with all my foundation reviews, I've already gone ahead and moisturized my face with my Ombre Lait Cream Concentrate. And today, because I am going out for a long walk, I've also applied my Body Shop sunscreen. So first I'm just going to generously spray my Skindinavia Makeup Primer Spray. And I feel today is a good day to review this foundation just because I have some breakouts right here. So we're going to test how this foundation looks on these breakouts. So on my right side, I'm going to go ahead and use the coconut primer. So the sample that I have. It just feels like a moisturizer. Seems to have a slip to it, but it's quite hydrating on the skin. So this is what the foundation looks like. It's a glass bottle container. So make sure you shake it up really well because it does tend to separate in the bottle. So you have this outer cap and then inside you have this kind of a weird dot applicator. So what I'm going to do is put some on the back of my hand and then dot it from there. So this is what the shade looks like. So I'm going to dot it on the left side of my face first where I don't have the Marc Jacobs primer and buff that out. So I'm just going to do a couple of dots. These dots are really tiny. So I'm going to start off with so much foundation. Sorry, I'm just going to bring my mirror right here so it's easier. So this is what one thin layer looks like. As you can see, it's given me quite a bit of coverage and a nice matte finish. I do think this gives kind of a medium coverage, and I am going to add a second layer just to see if the coverage is buildable and how it layers on top. I still have a ton of product remaining. And it's building up very quickly and very easily. Doesn't look like it's sitting on top of the first layer. I'm going to use it almost like a concealer. So as you can see, I think it's given me quite a full coverage with a little bit of foundation. I still have a ton. I probably took out too much. So with this foundation, just be careful and use a small amount at a time. Take less than what you think you will need. And I think it's a pretty decent match for my skin. I think especially once I bronze up my face, I think it's going to look quite okay. So moving on to the side that I did prime. So I don't know if you can tell, but this side is more radiant and more natural looking compared to this side which didn't get the primer. Also the shade, this one melts in better with my skin compared to this one. I think it looks a little ashy just because the skin is quite matte and dry at this point. So at this stage, I really like the side with the primer. So I'm just going to build a second layer on my cheeks where I have some breakouts and a few scars that are still showing through. So I can already see with the first layer that the dry patch around this particular acne does show up with this foundation. I think it would have been worse if I didn't use that primer underneath. Yeah, I do prefer the primed side. And even though I've just applied it, I can definitely see it settling into my smile lines on both sides. Hopefully you can see that on camera, right here, and then definitely here. But it goes away once I run a brush through it. So I think you have to set it quite quickly. I'm just going over the side once again to see if I can get rid of that powdery finish. Actually, on this side, I am going to run a damp beauty blender sponge to see if that helps in removing this powdery finish, because I can see the same finish on this side once I build up the foundation. So what I'm going to do is spray my face with this Scandinavia setting spray and then bounce this beauty blender over these cheek areas and see if it brings back that natural radiant finish that I like before layering it up. Actually, just using the spray also helped quite a bit. So yeah, you can see that once I used a beauty blender sponge, it somehow takes away that ashy look that it had before using this. I quite like the radiant finish that I'm getting with this foundation now. I'm going to add a little bit more. Okay, so that's a finish that I like. I am going to add some Kevyn Aucoin concealer just on this spot, and I'm going to finish the rest of my makeup and I'll be right back. So I've just quickly gone ahead and finished the rest of my makeup for this simple look. My eyes are bare, but I will be doing a look later this afternoon. I have applied my Kevyn Aucoin concealer. It went on really nicely, no problems there. And I also set my entire face with a very light dusting of the Laura Mercier translucent powder. And I also have my contour and blush on. Everything went on quite nicely. And I have no highlighter on my face right now just because I don't want the foundation review to be influenced by highlighter adding to shine on my face. But this is before adding any setting spray. Quite a nice natural finish, I would say. It's not too matte. I think I would describe this as a satin finish. So I'm just going to quickly go ahead and set my entire face with the Scandinavia finishing spray. So while this is drying, let's go over the claims of this foundation. So this is what the outer packaging of the foundation looks like. So very chic black and white outer cardboard packaging. You do get the shade name right on top there. Packaging, as I've mentioned before, is this frosted glass bottle with that strange drop applicator. I'm not quite fond of the drop applicator because you have to either put it on the back of your hand, which I don't mind, but I don't like the fact that the wand is touching my skin, so I have to be very careful with sanitizing my skin before using. So that's something of concern. But because it's a glass bottle, you can see how much foundation you've used up. I do think the foundation is very concentrated. It has twice the amount of pigment compared to many other full coverage foundations. That's what they claim anyway. But I do think that there's a lot of pigment in this product, and that's the reason why they have reduced the amount of foundation, because you do need less than most foundations to get a medium to full coverage. I wouldn't consider this packaging very travel friendly just because it's made out of glass. The formula is quite thick. It reminds me of the Kat Von D Lock-It foundation. So if you're familiar with that, I would say it's more of that thick, creamy consistency. The formula is oil-free, phthalate-free, sulfate-free, and paraben-free. So this foundation retails for £37 in the UK or $55 US, and you only get about 22 ml or 0.75 fluid ounce. in comparison with say 30 ml or 1 fluid ounce, which is the standard amount of foundation you get in containers. They've come out with 22 shades in this formula, and I don't like the shade range. Most of the shades are for light to medium deep skin tones. There's only like 3 shades deeper than me, so it's really bad for anybody who has darker skin tone. You won't find a match in this formula. But they do have a newer foundation, which is called the Shameless Foundation, I believe. They've done a much better job with the shade range. They have 29 shades and they're widely distributed. So there's like 10 shades for light skin tone, 10 for medium, and then about 9 for darker skin tones. But as far as this formula is concerned, there's not much for deeper skin tone, unfortunately. On their website, they do claim that 1 or 2 dots is good enough for a sheer to natural coverage, and then 3 for a natural to full coverage. I don't agree with that. I think you need more than 3 drops to get a good full coverage, as you've seen in the application so far. Unless they mean 3 dots in one specific area, then I can see that how it would get full coverage on that area. It also claims to give instant full coverage that can last up to 24 hours. So again, I'm not going to test this for 24 hours. I'm probably going to do a standard foundation wear test about 8 to 9 hours, and hopefully it stays put. It's supposed to blend instantly across the complexion to completely cover pores, blemishes, and other imperfections with the thinnest possible layer that lasts up to 24 hours. Now, if I look up close, I can still see my pores and also my acne during the application, as you can see, so I don't think that's true. It also claims that the pigments are made up of patented golden mica, which gives the complexion a more radiant, natural looking glow. I do agree with that. At least on camera it looks beautiful. It looks very radiant and glowy, and I'm kind of skeptical how it's going to last on my oily skin. But so far I really like the finish that it's given my skin, and it feels quite light. It doesn't feel as heavy as the Kat Von D Lock-It foundation, I would say. Maybe because you use less with this foundation, it doesn't feel like you have too much on your face. So I applied the foundation around 12:30 here in the afternoon. So I'll come back for my first check-in around the 4-5 hour mark, and then later in the night for my final check-in. So I'm back for the 4-hour check-in, and as you can see, my nose especially is a little bit too shiny. So as I move my face, you can see the rest of my cheek is still quite that soft matte finish, or the satin finish that it started with. The coverage is still on and everything looks quite good. There is no settling into my smile lines, but I do see that the foundation is kind of collecting around my nose, especially on the side that I did use the primer. But otherwise it looks fairly equal on both sides. So this is the side that I had primed. So what I'm going to do is just blot at this stage. And I'm just using my Primark mattifying blotting paper. So even though my face didn't look oily, it does look like it's producing some oil. So this sheet is kind of used up. Using a second sheet. So I do see some of the foundation coming off on the sheets because these are kind of colored yellow-brown, if you can see that. If I come closer, you can see that it's returned to that satin matte finish. I do have some settling around my nose, so I'm just going to take a brush and see if that goes away. So I'm using the same brush I'd used to apply the foundation. Yeah, that took away whatever had settled around my nose. So I'm just going out for an hour-long walk, and I'll do the final check-in around the 8 or 9 hour mark. So this is the end of the night, and it's almost 9 o'clock, so I've had it for 8.5 hours, and this is what my skin looks like. Except for my oily nose, the foundation looks as good as it did when I first applied it, which is amazing. Now I did go out for a 1 hour walk in the evening with Cooper, and it was on an incline, so I did break out a sweat, but still the foundation is very much in place. It hasn't budged. It hasn't settled into my smile lines, which is amazing for a foundation. So yeah, I'm ready to blot just to see if after I take off this oil, do I still get the foundation into that original satin kind of demi-matte finish. It's a lot of oil, but it doesn't show up as much. Just based on the blotting sheet, I do think that I can see some of the foundation coming off, but when I look at my face per se, I don't see any areas that are patchy. So if I come closer, you can see that it's come back to its original demi-matte finish. Now between the two sides, I don't see a difference wherein the side that got the primer has any advantage over this, except for looking slightly more natural when I first applied it. But at this point, you can hardly tell a difference, and I actually prefer the way my foundation looks on this side compared to this side which had the primer. So I wouldn't personally recommend the 40-pound primer to go with it. Now as far as application is concerned, I do think that the primed side went on a little more natural looking, if that makes sense, compared to the side that didn't get primer. That's only when I was layering up the foundation. If I just went in with one layer, so about 3 or 4 dots on each side, then I didn't have the problem of it looking gray and powdery. So I would not recommend layering too much with this foundation. So go in with this foundation, apply a light layer, and then I would suggest going in with your heavy duty concealer. For me, that's the Kevyn Aucoin concealer, to go over any of your spots, because this foundation doesn't look as good when you layer up too much. So even now on certain areas, I can see that gray finish, if that makes sense. Another thing I do want to note is that it has a slight tendency to cling on to dry patches, but nothing major. So I don't know if you can see this spot. So there is some foundation that's clinging to the dryness around it, but it doesn't look bad, if that makes sense. So if you have very oily skin like I do, I think you're going to really enjoy this foundation. I would rate it a 9.5 to 9.75 out of 10. And I'm taking off the remaining point just because the foundation is quite pricey. I've not had a good foundation that has given such nice results and has lasted for over 8 hours, despite me going for a very long walk and everything. So I am very impressed. So if you found this foundation review useful, please don't forget to hit that like button and also consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.
Open eye, feel the waves cut through me.